Let's take a look at some inconsistencies that I've been encountering with the xTool F1 Ultra and examine some observations that I've made that might help to resolve these inconsistencies. To start, let's talk about some background. I went through the whole focusing process. I calibrated using the two crosses. I made sure that they were perfectly aligned, and then went about my processing. And what I found is that at first, a lot of times, this would be fine and completely accurate, and I would get the desired results. After a while, and usually after I had turned off the machine and come back the next day, I would start getting inconsistencies. An example of this is this engraving that I did on stainless steel. These are both the exact same settings, everything. I even made sure that the focal length was exactly the same, but I did do an autofocus just in case, and the autofocus came out to be almost exactly the same every single time. It was around 31.2. So day one, I did 10 of these. Day two, I did another 10, and they were all exactly the same. Extremely consistent, just fine. Day three, I started getting these. I tried recalibrating, doing everything that I could think of, even going back to doing an initial recalibration using the two crosses, and nothing. It would still just consistently do this. So I was getting consistency between the pieces that I was doing, but this was not the desired result. The same thing when I was doing embossing. I was getting good embossing, and then on that third day, all of a sudden nothing. So let's take a look at that now. I should also say that this is only really noticeable with the IR fiber laser. Whenever I was using the blue laser, things seem to be fine, but I believe that it's because the metal, when you're working with it, it has much less tolerances, and it's way more noticeable when the focus is off a little bit. So here I have a 25 millimeter brass blank in the chamber, and I have a design that I'm going to attempt to emboss to it. So let's go ahead and just one more time before we start, we'll go ahead and do an autofocus. Okay, nothing changed since the last time I attempted an autofocus. We're at 31 millimeters. This looks fine. I already framed it in, so I'm not going to mess with that right now. But let's go ahead and process. Okay, what is going on here is nothing. There's no observable action at all with that brass. So let's go ahead and stop here. Now, what I will note is that in the past when this has happened, again, I'll be working just fine on a variety of pieces. All of the results are as expected. This will happen, and I've gone back and even recalibrated from scratch, and it still just doesn't work. Sometimes it's hit and miss. I've had a couple of times that I went and did that and it started working again, and I was happy and thought, oh, I fixed it, it's fine. But inevitably, I'll go to turn it on one day and nothing. So here's what I started experimenting with, and let's take a look at this now. So we had the focus at 31. Let's try 32 and see what happens. Again, if I were to manually focus by aligning the two dots or do an autofocus, it would have come to 31, or 31.2 is usually what it was. So now we're going to try 32. So I'm going to, now that we've changed the focus, I'm going to realign my image to the what's being shown in the picture here. Let's try this again. Nothing. Let's try 33. And again, we'll realign this. That looks good. Now you can see that I'm starting to get some action in there. It's very weak though. So let's try one more. Let's go to 34 and see what that does. Let's not forget to align. I think that looks good. And there you go. This is what I would expect the laser to be doing. We've got a good strong laser. I'm going to go ahead and stop this for right now so that I can talk without the fan going. So now how do I maintain these consistencies? I have it dialed in at 34, but if I want to either do a different embossment, or if I want to start working with the stainless steel, how am I going to focus? Do I let it autofocus and then just add 3 millimeters to it and do it that way? Or one of the things I can do is I can physically adjust the red dot to overlap with the blue dot now that I have the correct focus length. And at least in the future, when I put something else in there, I can manually align the two dots so that they overlap. And that's what I've done in the past. It works when I do that. However, I would like to be able to still use the autofocus. And one of the things that I've noticed is that if I change the position of the red dot physically, this no longer aligns properly. The image that I have and the image of the object in the chamber, the picture that I have in the object in the chamber, if I line them up here, they're not aligned there if I have physically moved the red dot. So what I can do in that case is that if I use framing, the framing is still aligned properly. It's just this image is no longer aligned properly and the autofocus no longer works. So one of the things that I think might help is if I can go through this process that I just did to find what the correct focal length is. Now that I have it dialed in, if I could somehow zero this out and make it so that I can align this and maybe manually align it with how the framing is showing is the correct spot, and then baseline it there. If there was some kind of a button that I could use to adjust this manually, that could work. But other than that, xTool, what are your thoughts on how to correct this problem so that you can continue to use autofocus and continue to align using the camera when a problem like this arises?